Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Good to see you, Daniel. How are you doing?
I am doing a lot better than I was a few days ago, Dr. Paul.
You're recovering too, huh?
I'm recovering too, yeah.
Oh, good.
It's wonderful to see you here, Dr. Paul.
Well, modern medicine, sometimes they do the right thing.
Sometimes they do the right
thing. When
thing.
we criticize medicine on what they do with coronavirus, I think they're legitimate. But when the doctors are left alone, I was thinking about the technology that we dreamed of when I was in medical school. The technology was very beneficial, and timing and everything else. So, and I certainly appreciate a lot of the concern expressed. But I'm here today and ready and raring to go solve our problems once again.
There we go.
But we have other good news today. We're going to talk about, and guess where we're getting the good news? From the CDC. And they put it on the front page and said, that Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul, they're right, and here we'll prove they're right. Here are our statistics. So they come out with these statistics, and they're just wonderful. It just shows the statistics that we've been reporting on, that it's not nearly as deadly as they say, and the pandemic is, some people do use the word fraudulent and all these things, but no, I think this is great, and I think you might have a chart there to show us on what their report was all about.
Yeah, let's go ahead and put up that chart actually now. This is this is from the CDC's own website. And it's their infection fatality ratio, and it's very important because that is the proportion of deaths among the infected population in total. And they have several different scenarios that they're dealing with. Their current scenario, which is the current best estimate, infection fatality ratio, ages 0 to 19, 0.00003. 20 to 49, 0.0002. 50 to 69 years, 0.005. 70 plus, 0.054. So that is their numbers, and I think you have some info to translate that to.
It's really the same thing, put it in a different way, and sometimes numbers can get confusing. It says 1 out of 34,000 would I guess that was a death.
Yeah.
Between 0 and 19. Everybody knows the kids aren't getting this, and yet the schools are being closed down. It's just horrendous. And that's continuing, but softening up, and we'll talk about one state that really softened up.
Yeah.
And then 1 out of 5,000, so that's a little more people from 20 to 49, but that's still not very many when you look at it, the percentages. And then 1 out of 200 would die from 50 to 69, and 1 out of 20 if you're over 70. We'll worry about that later on. But these numbers come out, and you read the numbers. The survival rates are essentially the only time it gets below 99.5%, a chance of dying, is over 70, and then it's down to 94. So you're still talking about such a fraction. But just think of the harm done because they use the scare tactics. They use this to be frightened. And there was one article today that I might quote from, but they were using the word. The whole thing is this is a gimmick for submission. And I think that's a powerful term, because especially when I think about how the football games go and the masking goes, it's the people getting so riled up. If you don't follow the rules, then you're not submitting to what is right and the authorities. So you're really an enemy of the state, and that's a bad thing to be. We want to be a friend of the state by helping them along by dissolving themselves.
And these numbers are, the important part about this is that they're not a denial of the illness. What they are is a confirmation that you need to focus on that 94% survival rate of those 70 and above. And we know that most of those people have comorbidities. They have other problems. The disease seems to really hit hardest the people, we talked to Dr. Mercola about this on Thursday, who have problems with insulin resistance, obesity, and these sorts of things. So these should guide what we do. They shouldn't tell us that nothing at all is to be done, of course, but it certainly tells us that if you're from 0 to 19, if you're a school-age child, 99.997% survival if you get the disease. There's not even any guarantee you'll even get it because of things we'll talk about later, like T-cell immunity and others.
But we've ended up with mass hysteria.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we're going to back off from that. But, you know, the obsession with this now, people walk around with claws where if they touch something, they have to wipe out. It's a hysterical reaction. But it's mass hysteria. And this is not good for progress, and it's not good for society. It's very, very destructive. But the big question is, has it been out of ignorance? No, there's some ignorance out there. It's been built on fear, and it's been also built on motivation. There's some people who think that this chaos is beneficial. That's how we can get the people to submit. And the submission is the big issue, and unfortunately, there are too many submissions. I just think the way the sporting events have been treated, people are submitting. They're bowing to it. They take their knee and say that now I'm a patriotic. I'm a good person now because I'm pointing out the evil in the world, and so they submit. And that, I think, is very dangerous.
And you probably saw what happened in Ohio to this one lady. She was watching, I think, her son's high school football game. She didn't have a mask on. The police came. They arrested her. They tased her. And she said, I can't wear a mask. I've, got an, and she was out in the open. So anyway,
right.
Let's move on to more. This is Good News Monday.
This is a good one. This is a good one.
And let's put up that next picture. This is the hero of the country right now, I think. Absolutely. The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. He held up that chart. That's the one we just were talking about. He had an extraordinary press conference on Friday, and he announced a new executive order lifting all state restrictions based on COVID. No restrictions on restaurant or bar capacity. And if a locality adds its own restrictions, they must justify that with facts. It prohibits local governments from closing businesses and from preventing people from working. Everyone has a right to work. It prohibits collecting fines for not wearing a face mask among the localities, and it essentially opens the state completely. You have to justify, but you're not allowed to collect any fines or do anything for not wearing a mask, so it's opening.
Never once did he diminish that there is a danger out there. It still persists, but he obviously is with us on the whole idea that the lockdowns and the reactions have been much, much more dangerous than dealing with the virus.
And Jeffrey Tucker has a great article, and we put it up on the Ron Paul Institute website, ronpaulinstitute.org, where he congratulates the governor, but he also quotes, this is how the governor started it. First of all, a few days ago, he had a press conference. He had a public meeting with three very well-recognized and well-regarded scientists, experts on the topic, and they went through painstakingly every one of these things. And so when the governor went out to make his proclamation, his executive order, here are the statistics he threw out. COVID hospitalizations are down by 77% since the July peak. COVID ICU hospitalizations down 72%. Doctor visits for COVID-like illness down 80% since the July peak. Daily hospital admissions down 81%. Percentage of patients who test positive, 4.32%. Only 24% of hospital beds are empty, 23% of ICU beds are empty. My guess is that those numbers are pretty similar to what we have here in Texas, in many other places that are still not opening up. But he said, based on these numbers, and as you say, understanding that there still is a disease out there, there's still a risk, but based on this, as Jeff Tucker says, DeSantis came to realize that these freedom-killing measures were not addressing the medical problem.
Right.
That's the difference.
So I wanted to follow up on this principle of submission. And Lou had an article up on his site, Lou Rockwell. It's by Gary Barnett. And the title of the article is, "The state's response to this virus," and this is a quote, "is nothing more than a weapon of mass submission." Yeah. And he goes on and explains, why it is so bad and what would it be for. And of course, he makes the point that political power is at stake. Power and influence and philosophy and certainly elections, the whole works, and a lot of money is involved. They think, the left are humanitarians; they wouldn't be in this for money. But it is very much orchestrated for reasons that we shouldn't tolerate. And by the way, I don't know whether we can bring this up right now. That has to do with Dr. Atlas.
Yeah.
Dr. Atlas is, and I think there's evidence that even the CDC is out to how are we going to get rid of them.
Get rid of them. Yeah.
Well, you can't have a person in a position like that actually telling the truth. So that's been rumored around, and we should do whatever we can to pass a message that he's doing his job the right way.
Yeah, he's a public policy professional as well as a medical doctor. So that's what we need is the nexus between public policy and sound medicine, and he provides that. Let's actually skip ahead to 2 because this is why we're bringing it up today. This among a number of reasons. We can skip ahead to 2 more. This is believe it or not, a phone call was overheard. The CDC director, who knows who he was talking to, but criticizing Atlas. Quote, everything he says is false. And this really goes back to, and we talked about it, I think it was on Thursday, wasn't it, that Senator Paul was interviewing Fauci, and people thought it was amazing because first of all, he pushed back on Fauci. He said, how can you say New York is the best example of how to deal with this when they had the worst death rate in the entire world?
Right.
But he also brought up the topic of the T-cell memory immunity and the crossover from other coronavirus types, providing additional immunity to people. And Fauci looked dumbfounded. He said, if you believe that, you're the only person in the world who believes that. And then immediately, because you can't say these things, because people will check them, immediately if you go up and find the people there are at least 24 studies showing this. It's one of the most important things that are coming out of this. And so Atlas had a press conference after that and said, well, that he misspoke. Redfield misspoke when he said the same thing. They're not saying the truth. And it's objectively true.
It'll be a shame if they're able to get rid of Dr. Atlas.
Yeah,
that'd be horrible, And they'll keep at it. They'll agitate, but they're being distracted by that nuisance of an election.
Yeah.
Of course, that may get pretty important too, because even I now question whether or not all the votes are going to be counted.
Yeah. Counted twice, maybe.
Boy, I'll tell you what, that is confusing.
It is.
You probably need an army to try to straighten that mess out.
It is. And Jeff Tucker in his piece, he makes a couple of good points, and I think it's important. So why do they persist in this? Why do people, even like our own governor and others, persist in restricting their own citizens? He points this out that the politicians who did this to their constituents, they fear that opening up will actually make them look stupid for closing in the first place. And Dr. Paul, you've been around politics for quite a while. It's very rare. And I would say Walter Jones is about the only one who publicly said, you know what, I was wrong. I made a mistake and I'm sorry. They don't want to do that. They don't want to do that. They want to keep these measures in place to save face themselves. And that is wrong. And I just saw something, we don't have a clip for it. I just saw something this morning out of Dallas that the suicide epidemic among young people is they've never seen anything like it. Young people, they've lost all hope. And they're turning to suicide. It's horrible.
And once again, there's a similarity. War is a big issue. Back with Walter, it was the war that he discovered was based on falsehoods, and and he was told that by the administration, so he changed his mind about that. But and of course, not very many, hardly anybody would join him. But that's the same thing here. It's this war on coronavirus, which allows this submission and the growth of the state. This continues. So this is, in a way, always using this fear. If you don't do it, you're unpatriotic. The world's coming to an end. Everybody's going to die. In this case, it was everybody's going to die from coronavirus. But all of a sudden, CDC admits it's not quite as threatening as influenza, or driving an automobile or whatever, or lightning.
Yeah. Well, it was just in March that Fauci said this is going to be, 10 times more deadly than a seasonal flu. Well, that isn't the case, and his own CDC is telling us that. But there is a political component, and we keep talking about it, and we don't endorse any politicians by a long shot. But you do have people like Joe Biden saying that Trump has killed 200 million Americans by the end of my speech. They want to squarely blame the president for every single death from this coronavirus. And it's all about politics, unfortunately, and politics is getting in the way from good public policy and public health policy. And that's a shame, because that's just confirms what you've always said, the separation of medicine and state.
Yeah, right. I'm going to bring up an economic issue, which I find fascinating and interesting, because you have to sort it out. It's not easy to say, he's right and they're wrong. It has to do with the court cases going on now. The Trump administration and CDC are being sued by landlords. And the issue is suspension of the ability of a landlord to put somebody out of their building. Matter of fact, it's going in the opposite direction when they'll put them out and they'll build more government buildings and open to the street people, you know, this sort of thing. But anyway, they're being sued because they're being ruined. And they say, oh, yeah, well, they're billionaires and there's a big room, you know, big hotels and all this stuff, and they have no sympathy whatsoever. But I personally know some individuals that might have 2 rentals.
Yeah.
And the rent isn't coming in. But there's 2 arguments. One is they can't do it. You can't suspend, you can't throw somebody out because they're occupying, they're breaking the law, they're breaking their contract. And the other thing is argues that would be more left wing, would be, well, okay, we know how to take care of this. We have a money machine. We'll just print money and send the money to the people who are renting, and they'll be happy. They pay the rent, and then also the landlords are going to be happy. But you know, there's going to be a lot of sympathy for these people who are losing their jobs because of government action and all this fear mongering. At the same time, are you going to put all the burden on the on the landlords? And some of them, you know, just really struggle. They try to get ahead. They have a little rental here, and the person's not paying. And so I predict probably what will happen is going to be easier to print money and pass out the money.
Yeah.
But it's interesting property contract arguments on what one should do with it. If it were minor, you know, if we didn't have these horrendous government-created lockdowns and corrections made, it wouldn't be so massive, and it could be sorted out, but and protect both the landlords and base it on property rights. But anyway, it won't be resolved easily. But don't sweat it, people. The government knows how to print money. Everybody will be happy until the money goes bad.
Yeah. I like that picture that goes with it. There's these people carrying a sign, cancel rent. Right. Now, what are the morality of that? Cancel rent.
That's good.
Free stuff, yeah.
That's how you get votes.
Yeah, free for everything. Well, I want to circle back around to Texas a little bit, and we do focus a lot on it. Part of it's because we live here, but part of it's because we're unhappy and upset. And I hope that the move taken by the Florida governor is going to put some pressure on our own governor, who's been very mealy-mouthed. Let's turn this next one. Here's someone who's got a little bit of spunk and who's not afraid of fighting. This is Shelley Luther. And you'll remember her, Dr. Paul. Right. She ran a hair salon up in Dallas. She said, I'm not closing. I don't care. She was arrested. She was thrown in jail. And she got out of jail and said, you know what? I'm going to run for office. I'm sick of this. So she's running for the Senate, the Texas Senate. She called Greg Abbott a, quote, tyrant governor. For the way he's handling the state and closing down businesses and picking, if you're a bar, you got to close. If you're a restaurant that serves drinks, you can stay open. So that's pretty exciting, and I think it's good. But the dam is bursting elsewhere too. And let's look at this next one. This is a letter sent to the governor by a representative here in Texas, Steve Toth. Basically, what he's saying is, Governor Abbott, I am withdrawing any support for you and for your leadership as the governor of the state of Texas. And he talked about the destruction of the population, of the economy, lack of leadership, lack of good sense. And here's a good example of lack of good sense, Dr. Paul. This is who he's listening to instead of listening to people who actually believe in freedom. Let's have the next picture. This is the notorious, the evil, the demonic Judge Hidalgo from Harris County. Even when the numbers are as good as Florida here, she says, you must keep businesses closed. You must keep schools closed. You can't go outside. Put on a mask. You know, it's funny, I saw, there was a press conference that she was in, and she didn't realize that it had gone live yet, and this was just released. She didn't have a mask on. She was standing there right next to another official, And then all of a sudden, when she realized that she was already live, she ripped out her mask from her pocket and threw it on as quickly as she could. So that shows about the double standards.
Does that qualify as hypocrisy?
A little bit of hypocrisy.
Yeah, that's good. I don't understand. I mentioned this to you a little while ago about Abbott's, recognizing what's going on, because it seems like he's a reasonably bright person. He's been successful in politics, and people have liked him.
He's not all bad.
But all of a sudden, I mean, if you're coming from a political view, he has to be. He's in politics.
Yeah.
That the Democratic numbers are going up in this state. Yeah. That should be of a concern to him. And also, the whole thing is he has not performed well, and his numbers are going down because of the coronavirus, and he's not really with the conservative.
Yeah.
So you sort of wonder what happens to people like that. Sometimes people get energized. DeSantis, he's been energized.
Yeah.
He didn't get worse. I mean, he tried to study this through and went along with it to a degree, but then it just dawned on him. He was awakened.
This is bogus.
And did the right thing. That's what we're hoping that Abbott will do, because we live here.
But you're right. The Democrats will automatically hate him no matter what he does, and he's losing that base of conservative Republicans, for lack of a better term, free market people who are being destroyed. Well, I'm going to close out if we're done. It's with I'm going to circle back to our good buddy Dr. Fauci. And this came out over the weekend. This is not going to shock you. I should say it's going to shock you. Let's look at that next picture. Here's Fauci. He cautions that a vaccine won't eliminate the need for masks and public health measures. So he's saying even if this magic vaccine comes, you're still going to have to wear a mask. You're still going to have to social distance. And this is a shocker. You're still going to have to wash your hands because, of course, before coronavirus, nobody ever washed their hands. But here's Fauci. This is the next one. This went around over the weekend, this little meme over here, if you can look at the next one, that next picture. And this is also hypocrisy. The one on top is Fauci enjoying a baseball game. Of course, they cleared everyone out but him, and he's there with some guests. They're not wearing a mask. And underneath is the woman from Ohio, arrested, tased, manhandled, brutalized. She was doing the same thing, sitting outdoor, watching a game without a mask on. This is the hypocrisy of our so-called leaders. And I'll just finally, my last thing, Dr. Paul, is encourage all of our viewers to go to ronpaulinstitute.org for articles, subscribe to this channel, hit notifications so you can watch and keep up with the Ron Paul Liberty Report.
Very good. And I'm going to close by talking a little bit, I haven't done this before, talking a little bit about my weekly report, because I want to emphasize it, because it was the incident that occurred last week when we got blackballed. And it was taken, one of our programs taken down, and we've been warned. So, of course, we've been warning ourselves all along. How do we handle this? State will be bearing down on us. Now, if we become more influential and that more people, we get more DeSantis out there that they're not going to back off and say, oh, I guess we better back off. They'll put more pressure on us. But the first statement they sent to us, and I think you sent in a challenge to them or asked a question, they said that their answer was, we violated the community standards. Now, what are community standards? That's interesting. We wouldn't want to violate, the culture of a nation and standards that have been voluntarily agreed to. Decency. No, that isn't it. The community standards means a few people, and they emphasize individualism. The individuals in the government saying what community standards are, not yours and mine. So it's community standards is what they want to set. And that could be anything. That is so much garbage. And then they had another sentence in their rejection. YouTube does not allow content that explicitly disputes the efficacy of WHO.
Wow.
Oh. Do you think that's a violation? You'd think somebody would ask a question to the presidential candidates. What do you think about that? And see what they say. So, but anyway, things are moving along in the right direction. I think that that more and more people are coming our way. And believe me, we can't overemphasize DeSantis is coming out for Florida, and the silliness of some of the other people who will stand by and will submit forever and will never capitulate and say, oh, maybe I made a mistake. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.